today we are talking about Generative AI, a guide for educators. So here with us leading this discussion is Bruce Ballenger and Kelly Myers. They are both professors at Boise State University. And Bruce has taught courses in composition, composition theory, the essay tradition, and creative nonfiction. He's the author of 7 books, including 3 texts in the Curious series, The Curious Researcher, The Curious Reader, and The Curious Writer, all from Pearson Education. His text, Crafting Truth, Short Studies in Creative Nonfiction, is from the same publisher, and he is thrilled to be joined by his colleagues, Doctors Kelly Myers and Michelle Payne, in writing the 6th edition of this book. And Kelly Myers here is, like I said, also a professor of English at Boise State University, and she teaches argument and rhetorical courses, nonfiction workshops, and capstone courses. She writes about revision strategies, opportunities, and regret. She also works with undergraduate students to design and implement student success initiatives across the university. The Curious Writer was the textbook she used at her first semester of teaching 20 years ago, and she feels honored to be able to contribute to the book that she loves. So I want to say thank you so much for being here today. And Bruce and Kelly, I just wanted to start off this conversation here by asking you, why did you choose this book for the summer book club?
Yeah, thank you. Welcome, everyone. We're so glad that you're here. We should note that this piece that you read, also there's a follow-up, a full book, we wanted to read and talk about this particular version, the more concise version, because it played a huge role in our writing process and was really transformative for us. So I'll just sort of start with the story. We were writing the 10th edition of The Curious Researcher right when ChatGPT hit. And so, here's a book that's all about research-based writing in a moment when research and writing are just in complete flux and sort of we're questioning what does it mean to do those activities in this moment. And Bruce and I would meet at the same coffee shop every week and try to figure out how are we going to write a book about this when this is suddenly not making any sense to us. Something we thought we knew so well was now surrounded by so many questions. And one of the things that we did in those early days, we asked ChatGPT to write the introduction of our new edition. And it did it in 30 seconds, and it did it beautifully. So needless to say, we were in a moment of crisis. And this text that we all read was really anchoring for us. I think because it's succinct, the way that it distills the technology and the history, the way that it directs us to think about specific areas and questions. We felt like we were in the middle of a storm, and this helped us find footing so that we could pave a path forward. And so it didn't give us answers, but it did kind of give us the confidence to figure out how we would write this book in a moment of such uncertainty. So yeah, again, I think the reason was that it was anchoring for us, and we hope that it can be that for others. And then I guess the last thing I'll say is that it felt like when ChatGPT hit the scene, there was such upheaval and such a storm. And that has kind of quieted, it feels like, at least on our campus. And we believe we need to be stirring up those winds again. It's tempting to just avoid. And what this text does is remind us how important it is to engage, to maintain that sense of urgency, to maintain a focus on the kinds of questions he's asking us, and to keep coming up with creative and innovative ways forward, because it just keeps expanding. It's not going away. What would you add, Bruce?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to understate the terror that we felt. Here we are about to write this. Those of you who know The Curious Researcher may know that it's been around for a while. In fact, the first edition came out in 1994 when I was a grad student. This is the 10th edition, and the pedagogy had sort of developed and flowered. And then suddenly we were faced with this revolution. And one of the things that impressed me in this handout in this guide is the data on how explosive this technology has been. That it has, Kelly has a comment in the textbook. This has never happened before. And you look at the adoption rate of Gen AI compared to things like TikTok, and it's just remarkable. So we're looking at that data and thinking, we've got to figure this out, and without being experts. Obviously, none of us, I don't think, here are experts. So it's hard to understate how terrified we were and how relieved we were to finally finish the book and think, well, I think, and we'll want to talk more about that, but I think we've figured out some stuff that's going to be helpful for teachers who teach especially first year writing. But rather than talk about in the abstract about Gen AI and writing, what I'd like to do is to pull you guys in the longer treatment by Sidney Dobrin in his textbook that expands on the guide. He talks about a op-ed essay that I believe was published in the New York Times by a Columbia student about how AI has invaded the classroom. And I thought it was really interesting. She basically said that, and this may just be true of Columbia, I don't know, but she basically said that what she sees is not students having Gen AI write papers for them. This is how she describes the more popular strategy. She writes, the more effective and increasingly popular strategy is to have the AI walk you through the writing process step by step. You tell the algorithm what your topic is and ask for a central claim, then have it give you an outline to argue this claim. Depending on the topic, you might even be able to have it write each paragraph the outline calls for one by one, and then rewrite them yourself to make them flow better. So here's our question. Is this bad? Is this cheating? Does this raise your hackles, or do you think, oh, this isn't so bad, I can work with this? What are your thoughts? This is your opportunity to talk.
Feel free to unmute yourself if you'd like to verbally speak to answer, or of course, you're always welcome to put it in chat as well, but we'd love to hear what your thoughts are.
Well, I'll share that my immediate gut reaction as someone who majored in English is that it is cheating, but I also feel like this is not going away. So maybe the way that we think about how we assess students needs to change.
Karen?
I think that we're going to be redefining cheating.
Yeah.
I think what this does, though, I teach at a community college where the students are pretty much stuck with their noses to their phones, and they are not doing the kinds of individual thinking and individual reacting to the world. They're waiting for somebody on TikTok or Facebook to tell them how to think. So I don't see a danger. I don't even know what danger means anymore. In ChatGPT, if you can articulate your own thought, if you can say, as you folks did, we need an introduction for this book. Here's some information about the book. Here's where we'd like the book to go. Go for it. Show us what you can do, Mr. Robot. And I've actually explored that as well. I had it do a taxonomy of learning for a particularly complicated unit, and it did that very well. Okay. Now there were some gaps because the thing doesn't really think; it just sticks words together. But it can do it faster than I can. Mm-hmm. So I think that if that's where we're going, we're probably okay. The catch is, and I'm not running down my students, all right? And I don't think there's a person who teaches community colleges who doesn't have this problem. Mine are also dual credit. So they're high school students. I don't think that there's a person that has this, but they simply have not thought about any element of their experiences and actually put that element into words. So in that regard, it's taking the place of the kind of cognitive processing that really I think we want humans to use. And that's my concern, because you just skip a step.
Right.
And
I mean,
I don't know.
One of the things that kind of impressed me about this example is that the students who use this method apparently know something about the writing process. You know, I mean, they're going through it step by step using AI to give them feedback.
Yeah, I can give them that.
Which is kind of interesting to me. But as we're going to talk about soon, the whole issue is sort of authenticity, it's agency, is the sense that students have some mastery over their own work, some control over their own work. And in that sense is the process that I described to you here troubling.
I didn't see the handout.
Okay.
So
yeah, I mean, basically,
and that's okay. I can
this
manage it.
student describes what she sees other students and how they use ChatGPT, and that is to go through the writing process step by step. My topic is, you know, concussions in female soccer. Give me a central claim, and then ChatGPT generates a central claim, and then please, can I have an outline for that claim? And it then generates an outline. Can I have you write the paragraphs for each one of these, and then I'll rewrite them. So that's this kind of process.
Yes, that's it. That's the problem right there.
And the rest of you, yeah.
Yeah, that's the problem. Yeah.
Okay, so my question is, because it sounds like the students you are referring to, they know how to create prompts, right? So being able to engineer prompts to get the correct response from ChatGPT, is that equal to knowing how to write, to sit down and think, this is here's what I'm thinking. How am I going to take that and put it in a format so somebody else who's reading it can understand my thought process, what I'm thinking, my opinion, whatever kind of writing it is. And it doesn't even matter, like, it doesn't have to be a writing class, whether it's history, whether it's political stuff, whatever, you know, is this the ability to write a prompt? Is it going to create the ability to do this? And this is my, I don't know what to call it. This is where I cannot embrace generative AI, because it takes away agency from human beings.
Right.
So I'm so not a fan. And yes, it's here. And everybody, like I see around me, people seem to be caving into the whole thing. But I don't know. I don't know that this is going to enhance the users, like at school.
Right.
Yeah. So this is just my response to your question with another question. Really, are we passing along knowledge, which is what education is about anyway? Yeah.
I really appreciate that. And as we were working on the 10th edition, we were constantly asking the question, what is gained and what is lost with this new technology and with uses of this new technology? And it caused a part of the crisis was just questioning everything we've always done in teaching writing and wondering, like, okay, this thing can write a literature review in 30 seconds. How important is it for our students to learn the skill of writing a literature review, or to learn the skill of writing a prompt, and to just weigh all of that? And it pressed us to really articulate why it matters for them to learn it. So actually it is a helpful pedagogical activity to reflect on all of these things that And to think about, where is the line between, all right, we've always done it that way, but maybe there's an opportunity. Because in some cases we saw, all right, adapting to work with this tool in new ways could actually be really beneficial. So there are some things where it felt like a hard line, like, no, we need to maintain that practice for these reasons. But we had to assess everything, all of our practices, everything in the book, in light of this new technology that can do all of it immediately.
So let me try to pull this into a problem that you will recognize. And that is, those of us who teach writing understand, I think, because of our experience, the struggle of getting students to embrace the process of writing, to see the acquiring those skill sets as useful. And the tension is always between our longing to get to motivate them to engage deeply in the process and think deeply about the things that they're writing versus efficiency. And, you know, in the larger Dobrin book, he borrows a metaphor about climbing Everest. You know, our students, many of them would like to take a helicopter to the top. And we're trying to say, no, you can do that. And sometimes that's a good idea, but we're trying to get you to climb, because you're going to get to know the mountain better. Because as you climb, you're going to develop these skill sets that are going to be really useful to you in other writing situations. And then suddenly ChatGPT comes along and says, helicopter rides for free. And so now the dilemma that we've always had becomes even more profound, is that how do we get students to appreciate the climb in the face of a technology that will gladly take all of their friends to the top of the mountain and essentially write papers for them. So that was the dilemma that we tried to address in the latest edition of the Curious Research. And as we looked at it, we realized that the book has been around since 1994 and has been advocating for a pedagogy that involves encouraging students to exploratory research as opposed to thesis-driven argumentative research. And it occurred to us that this is a pedagogy whose time has come again, that it's time again to invite students to engage in what we call essayistic writing. And, you know, just to describe that briefly, is that essentially we want to create assignments in the age of ChatGPT, in which the inquiry process is driven not by the desire to find a quick answer, a thesis, but by a question that has personal meaning to the student and is relevant to the subject matter, perhaps, of the course. And that we want them to sort of adopt the perspective of an essayist. That is, that the process of writing a researched essay is not to find a thesis as quickly as possible, to just land on an answer. It's to look for trouble. It's to find questions about the subject that you're writing about and find the best questions that will drive you into that subject, and to place extra time on the exploratory phase of writing, so that invention becomes much more important in this kind of writing. And it's our conviction that will give students a sense of agency, make it more likely that they're using the technology to assist them in climbing the mountain rather than helicoptering them to the top.
And it connects back to the guide, because you'll hear Dobrin in a couple of places referring to the process movement, just sort of touching on it. And it was that was one of the epiphanies for us, you know, in the early moments, was, wait a minute, we know how to do this. We have, both Bruce and I were at the University of New Hampshire separately, but trained in similar practices that really foreground inquiry and personal writing. And it feels like this is a moment that calls for the author, the human, to be front and center, to be leading and driving the process now more than ever. And that's just been very exciting for us to figure out and sort of work through. And a lot of what we've had to think about is how can that driving happen, that authorship, kind of in collaboration with this tool? Because I think Dobrin makes a great point that we're actually doing them a disservice if we don't teach them to use the technology. And I found the link to career readiness very compelling. And so again, not avoiding it, but teaching them strategies. So we've done a lot of thinking about how can we teach inquiry-driven writing with generative AI as a tool that's coming alongside.
Yeah, so we're going to stop and get a conversation going, hopefully, but let me just give you a very specific example. I've been teaching inquiry-based writing for a long time. That's a central part of the textbook's approach. And one of the things in teaching that was the biggest struggle for me was helping students generate interesting research questions. And it's a problem partly because when we ask students to write about something they don't know much about, but they're curious about, they have very little domain knowledge, so they don't know what a good question is. So they start with factual questions, like, what is blank? And those are not good inquiry questions. Those don't go anywhere. They lead to reports, and that's not what we're after. And so I did, the book goes through somersaults trying to teach students what a good inquiry question is and sort of some exercises to generate them. And so I had a student who's working on a essay. She was a recovering addict, and she had a lot of skepticism about her experience with AA. And I said, sort of what so far is the question that's driving this project? And she said, well, I don't know. I felt like, the AA dictum that you're always an addict kind of undermines my self-identity. I don't want to always feel like that. And I said, well, what might be a good research question around that? And she says, well, I don't know. And I said, well, let's see what ChatGPT comes up with. And so we entered some of the material, give a context for the question. And suddenly ChatGPT comes up with 12 questions. And I was thinking to myself, how long would it take me to get a student without the technology to generate 12 questions to choose from? Now, does that mean that the student is surrendering some control over the project? And ideally, we want our students, and particularly in later grades, upper division classes, and obviously grad school, to come up with their own question. But what a wonderful thing it is to have a technology that will generate in seconds 12 questions that they can choose from. And again, the agency they have is the choices they make about which trails to follow. And so we saw this in so many these opportunities in so many ways that seemed that students could exploit very successfully without losing their agency.
One way that we've thought about it is to consider the dazzle versus the spark. So ChatGPT and these tools generate output that is dazzling, right? To generate a list of 12 questions like that can dazzle students. And I've seen it with my students where they say, oh, that's better than what I could ever do. But where it's powerful is if you take that output and you help them find the spark. And so in that list of 12 questions, what is resonating with the student? Where is their energy and why? And then that can lead to new questions, right? So it can be a profound tool for invention, for combating writer's block. I did an activity with my capstone students where it was a small group and I knew them all really well. And so I had ChatGPT write cover letters for each one of them, for they were about to go out on the job market. And they were shocked when I put these letters. We were working on resumes and cover letters. And I put a personalized letter in front of them written by ChatGPT. They were dazzled again, but then they started to look at them and see, oh my gosh, this is a formula. This is all the same thing over and over. And what happened was they started to dig in and find the spark. And for one of them, there was this phrase that he really, this one phrase in the whole thing where he thought, that's interesting. That's an interesting way to describe me. And it was about this sort of, these unifying, like he had these two characteristics that seemed in tension, and it surfaced in this output. It was the spark that then led to him writing a really interesting cover letter. And so this is a way of thinking about the difference, the dazzle versus the spark, and constantly getting them through reflection and analysis to find and follow the spark.
We have about 4 minutes left, or five minutes. So now is a good time to open up the floor, I think. Right, guys?
Yeah, I want to read 2 comments that just came into the chat and point your direction over there, because Emily made a good point. I think it's important to remind students that it does not create knowledge. AI collects knowledge that has been shared online. It's a fishing net, not a creation tool. Yes. And then Heather reshared something from Elise. Thank you for sharing. Faculty also need to allow students the time to climb the mountain. Otherwise, they'll turn to ChatGPT to help them.
Great. Yeah, it's a great point. And I don't think the academic culture really encourages that. They accept in our writing classes. And so that's a very important and real reservation with this approach, I think.
Yep.
Does anyone else have any other questions that they would like to bring up or ask them in these last few minutes that we have? I do see another question that did come through the chat. Maybe you guys can chime in, touch on a little bit. It says, my question is, can the students actually write? Are they able to articulate their thoughts? At the end of the day, the reason for a writing class or any class is to impart actual skill. Learning how to engineer a prompt is equal to actually having the skill to produce material. And Margaret, go ahead and come off mute. We'll take your question.
Okay, so when you were talking about personal meaning having to be incorporated into essays, it sounds like that's one way to remove the direct influence of ChatGPT. It can't tell the student what it feels or how a person reacts. But as you were discussing that, I kept thinking, I spent a lot of time telling students that they're not in middle school anymore, and that they're writing about an essay or a book or whatever that everyone has read. And it's not, I don't want reaction or response papers. And it seems like one of the strategies you're discussing is going in that direction, and I'm not quite sure how to get the balance there.
Right. What we probably don't need is more sort of grandmother essays, although frankly, I didn't mind reading some of those from time to time. What we're talking about is much more rigorous. And I could go on and on about sort of this essayistic approach and what that means and how it's linked to academic inquiry. But just to simplify it, I would say the big difference is that what we're insisting on is that students find questions that drive their writing. And that's different, because finding the questions is not only a very personal thing. Sometimes it's a question that's related, intersects their experience with a subject. I had a concussion in soccer, and now I want to research soccer, women's concussions in soccer. So yes, it is a personal response, but it's also an analytical one. And that is that the students have to sort of learn what kinds of questions are being asked about this text or about this topic. And how does their question fit in? So that the time spent on the exploratory phase of figuring out what the question is that they care about is a rigorous process. And when I think you start with questions instead of answers, then the material can go in a variety of different ways that ultimately may surprise the student. It will certainly engage them more. And I just, to sum up, I think the kind of writing that we're describing is creative nonfiction with citations. So if I want to model this kind of writing to students, I would find a Leslie Jamison essay or a Kelly Myers essay. She wrote a beautiful one about failure, her favorite topic. And demonstrate to students, in other words, I wouldn't use an academic essay because the process of coming to understand something is veiled. It's hidden behind, all of that's removed. Basically, you get an argument. But if we invite students to write exploratory essays, creative nonfiction, then they are narrating their story of understanding something. They're following that story. Their experiences and observations become relevant if they're relevant. And they become, I think, much more explicit narrators and agents in their own work. I'm not saying the entire university should write creative nonfiction. I'm saying if we want to introduce students how to engage in academic inquiry in a genuine way and practice using ChatGPT as a writing assistant, this is the genre that I think is most likely to sidestep all of the issues that we're concerned about. Cheating, lack of agency, authenticity.
And I think the connection coming back to Dobrin is just that we are in a moment where we have to make process more visible, right? We have to, something that creative nonfiction and genres like that do is to make the thinking visible. And in light of this technology, this revolution, we're gonna have to make our students' thinking and learning, particularly in writing classes, more visible. Because we're now in a culture where all of these things that we've traditionally asked them to do can be done quickly and with pizzazz by a technology. And so we have to see their thinking. And we have really good models for this in genres like creative nonfiction, where we've seen authors make their thinking, their experiences visible.
Process of coming to understand something.
Yeah.
I would add one last thing. We're mostly writing teachers here, and one of the things we know is the importance of getting students to reflect on the process, that whole metacognitions piece, get students to think about why they're making certain choices as writers. I don't think there's a group of teachers more well-equipped to help students begin to reflect on their own integrity with respect to this technology than this group of people and our colleagues around the country. We know how to get students to reflect on things. And that's the other pieces that's demanded here. Not that we set out rules about what they can do and not do, but that we constantly, with ChatGPT, but that we constantly ask them to think about what this means for them as a writer. What are the hazards? Is it cheating? Is it not cheating? And I think that's the other piece that is crucially important as we navigate the next few years. And we know how to do that.
We do.
Great. Well, we are at time. So I just want to say thank you to everyone who joined today. And I just put up a picture of their books just so you're aware. And if you have any questions or wants to additional follow-up, feel free to email me. You can just reply to any of those reminder emails that you got, or there'll be a survey at the end of this. Feel free to put a note in there too. We'll be happy to follow up with you, get you a desk copy of their books if you would like. And again, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate this great discussion around AI. And we hope to be in contact with you again soon at one of our other events or webinars. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.